A look at World Mobile White Paper.
Hey guys, another video from Istanbul of Nord Pool and NBX. So, apologize for not producing so much videos this week. I have been knocked out with COVID-19, as the rest of the family have been. Luckily, it's going fine. Everyone is okay. Probably we have the Omicron variant, so mostly feel it in the throat. But apart from that, we're good. So in today's video, I want to continue my look at World Mobile, and today I think we will look at the white paper of World Mobile and try to deep dive a bit more into how these nodes work, as I think that's really going to be interesting going forward, and many are probably curious about that. So let's look at the article. Right, so this is the white paper by World Mobile. And as always, when I do these white paper reviews, it's just my initial impressions. I'm not a mathematician, so I'm not going to go into any of the formulas, but I will just offer my viewpoints. Basically, World Mobile is trying to have a three-layered approach to solving telecommunications, and with that I mean they have these three types of nodes, and together they will both be able to share and distribute and even talk with the legacy telecommunication systems of the world. And this three-layer node approach, combined with this sharing economy that's fueled by blockchain, is just a way better method to reduce capital expenditure and to go to places that you could not afford before, because suddenly it's the users themselves who share the burden but also the profits of using the system, and that's enabling people all across the world. It's that old saying, like don't just give the money but give, for example, a fishing rod so you can fish. And this is the same, really. It's enabling communication and enabling the people there to themselves have this communication equipment and contact to others. Okay, so with that said, let's look at some of the numbers and why they're doing this. So these existing network operators, and they're quite big. There's over 1,000 mobile operators across the world with trillions of dollars invested. But what are they expecting to do when it comes to reducing cost? They're only expected to reduce their 60% operational costs at a level of just minus 0.21% between 19 and 2026. So the improvements in the legacy systems, they have taken out all the low-hanging fruits, as you can say, and they're slowly improving. Of course, they're improving as well, but they don't have these huge leaps that they can do. And just as an example, just using on their nodes for World Mobile, by using solar panels, and this being 20 to 40% of the network operation cost, they can already save a ton. And you get that when you have thousands and hundreds of thousands of air nodes that individually just need one or two solar panels. And then you are distributing. That's the power of distribution. How easy it is to set up and maintain. Because imagine a telco operator having to make all of the solar panels for its operation. It would cover a city, cover huge areas. But if you distribute it over all the users who will use it, then the land is already there and you can utilize this. And the maintenance is easy because it's the responsibility of the air node operator. So already there is a huge point, really, like how the power of distribution. And I just wanted to highlight that. And as I say, this reduces the security and leasing costs, and it's a self-sustaining model because the air node operators, they're incentivized to make everything work perfectly and to earn money, and it's enabler that's making them have a way of living. So I really like that. And so what I said is there's a 3-layered system. So we have these Earth nodes. They provide authentication, identity. And with identity, what I mean here is like identity solutions. We will come back to that. They have this blockchain functionality and the so-called internode communication. As you will see in this system with these 3 types of nodes, they need to communicate with each other, and they do this through this internode communication. So all of the nodes have this module called internode communication. And some of the nodes have telecommunication services. Not all Earth nodes need to have telecommunication services, but there have to be someone who does this so that the telecommunication part works, obviously. And the Air node, they provide the coverage and the internet access to the user. And what's not mentioned here, but later in the article, it's also where they monitor performance. Air nodes are the monitors of performance as they report back some performance metrics. And we have these Aether nodes. They are the link to the legacy telecommunication operators. So when you're doing what's called a offline telco call, meaning in this case offline from the World Mobile Network, then use the Ether nodes to do the last transmission layer to the customer or to the person the customer is calling that's outside of the network. So these Earth nodes, they are composed of a number of software modules, and they communicate through this internode API. And here you can see the decentralized identity module, DID, and they have a ledger layer. I'm more precise in what's the blockchain module. It's a ledger layer, and they have a telecommunication module for the telecommunication layer. And it's important we look at the internode API. So this is responsible for the communication between all nodes and all of the subsystems throughout the network. This will be a layer within all of the layers. It's the one that connects everything. It's a bridge. It translates between the different modules, between the digital identity, the telecom, and the blockchain modules. And also between Earth nodes, Air nodes, and Ether nodes. So when an Air node in the village in Tanzania wants to do a call to another village, it will have to send through the internode API to the Earth node that will handle the communication request and connect it with this other Air node. So these Air nodes or this internode API, it's handling the processing of user registration and authentication request. Interesting here is it will also have like a guest account, and this is a great way to roll out the service. They will offer a free guest account that can be used for some limited time, but or limited resource. But then you have the option to, if you really like the service, to register. And then of course you need a balance, and this balance would, I assume, initially be used for the phone calling services, but later of course you can use this balance for other services as well. And handling service requests, handling telecommunication events, handling and storing quality of service and other quality measures in the blockchain. So it's really the internode API who will store this, and it will be in the Air node, probably on the Earth node as well, and maybe even on the Ether node. And it's a way to simplify the complexity of the business logic from the rest of the system. And so this internode API is what's calling the shots to all of the other modules. And interesting, enforcing the rules and contracts set in the blockchain are followed by the telecom module. So I guess that would mean, for example, the Earth nodes are competing on transaction fees. So let's say some are cheaper to do a call, and they will measure with the quality metrics and the cost, the transaction fee, and make sure that what you agreed upon when you did the call is handled also correctly in the blockchain part, as well as in the telecommunication module. So there's no disparity; it's the same. And the digital identity solution module, I think is really important. It's a way to enable a lot of financial solutions. It's a way to enable a lot of services. So it's a key module. And you will have credential management, and they will use something called Atala Prism, and I have familiarity with it as I have attended Atala Prism course. And basically you can issue different credentials, and you can have different issuers too as well, and it can be used for tons of stuff like managing tickets, managing CV, managing like school credentials, bank financial credentials, identity, everything really. So it's a big deal. And the blockchain itself is there to provide security, immutability, transparency, and privacy. So basically, what it will only share publicly what should be shared publicly, and the rest will be private to the user. And for example, how much is spent, probably there will be a public ledger of the spending, but not the identity of who spent it. Probably that will be on a private ledger. It will be interesting to see how that rolls out, and I'm quite aware that World Mobile believe they can do a better job than the legacy telecoms, as they have a lot of user data that they use, and that World Mobile is trying to make that data in the power of the user instead of in the power of the telco company itself. So they will have this financial ledger with balances. And here, this is actually important. The processing of rewards for the nodes is ensured to be an automatic payment. And that's hugely important for legal reasons. That means that all of the transactions, all of the fees, everything is done by the protocol itself. You are not a custodian, and as we know, being a custodian has a lot of implications. But if you're not a custodian, it's handled by the protocol itself. That's a big deal, and it's a good thing from a legal perspective, as far as I am concerned, because it means that it's not up to, say, an Earth node to distribute any of the rewards to its stakers, and all of the problems that would involve. So I'm very glad to see this, that it's an automated payment process by the protocol itself. And here you can see that they have trying to distribute a secure storage of user data and metadata, and through this public blockchain, but also private data vaults. And these data vaults will store user aliases and telephone numbers, know your customer, call logs. Yeah, and this is things that should be private, like who did you call, when. Definitely has to be private. And the telecommunication module, if you leave now the internode, as you can see, we have gone through the internode, and then we have talked about the decentralized digital identify module, and then the blockchain module. But the telecommunication module, it will handle all of the media routing. So interesting, we will have this video communication as well. It's not just a legacy audio type of calls. Message routing, both SMS and peer-to-peer. And as you can see, the telecommunication model will also have this quality of service monitoring. And for example, your jitter, meaning like the difference in delay between different packets of information. So you can have a solid solid delay on average, but if you have a huge jitter, that sometimes it takes you 20 seconds between a package, but usually it's like 10 milliseconds, you still can have a higher jitter because you sometimes have these delays. And that gives you some indication, or I guess real reliability, because you want to have a service that works perfectly every time. So yeah, it makes sense to do this type of quality of service monitoring. And it's fair to everyone, it's transparent, it's public what they're measuring, it's up to the node operators to compete on these variables. And it's a self-healing network. They do analysis and algorithms for operating networks and updating of the distributed routing tables. So this has a lot of implications for the Earth node operators. It means that there will be in this telecommunication some form of sorting, some form of priorities mechanisms for what hops are taken, what node do you use as the node that starts the communication, what node do you use as the end of the communication, are there hops in between with other Earth nodes and air nodes. We will see how this plays out, but for me it already tells me that there will be some form of metrics you will be measured on. There will be some sorting mechanism. I hope this sorting mechanism will be as public and transparent as possible, because that means it's easier for the Earth node operators to compete, and it's more fair to everyone than to compete. And they use distributed hash tables for nodes, and this is used for the routing of the hops, as I said. And of course, you need not only Earth nodes in other countries, you need to have local nodes, and they call these air nodes. Oops. And these air nodes, they provide the access layer, and they are. It's interesting that it will depend what hardware they use. So sometimes it will be much smaller hardware requirements if it's a small village, but a larger village or even cities with multiple air nodes will have different hardware configurations. And it makes sense, of course, to do this. And it's part of the strategy of World Mobile to use off-the-shelf equipment, have something that's you're not dependent on any single hardware merchant. You can use all of these different hardware configurations, and that's what they're going with this air node strategy. I'm sure it will be interesting to see if we will have air node designs. Will, for example, Earth node operators collaborate with air node operators? Because at the end of the day, you want as good a service as possible. So you want the equipment to talk efficiently with each other. Will there be Earth node operators designing air nodes and offering incentives to use these air nodes? It's going to be interesting to see play out how this will work. But in general, the idea is simple and powerful. It's that you can use all of these different types of equipment, and what they will do is access through this internode API. The air node will contact the Earth node, and through this they will be able to do the network transactions, be it telecommunications or ledger or anything really. As you can see, this is done by the air node passing the user authentication details to the Earth nodes. So it's the Earth node who checks the identity, it's the air node who passed this information. And as you can guess, of course, then spec-wise, the air nodes will be lesser specs. Earth nodes without telecommunication will be lesser specs, and the one with the highest specs will be, of course, the one using the telecommunication modules on top of the other modules that will have the higher specs. So Ether nodes, in general, this is like one per country. It's to communicate with other telecom operators, usually probably located in a data center near the other telecom operators. This is not something that every average user will see, but it's still needed, as you don't want a network that's just isolated to inside its own network, but can talk also to others. You can make a call to other telecom operators. And when it comes to this node quality grading system, it uses local latency between nodes, and this is for me interesting. And would you only be graded on your latency to the exact air node that contacted you, or it will be the latency of the whole chain, all of the hops for that service? Let's say you have this customer who wants to use the air node to call another village. Will it be all of the chain, the latency of all of that to that second village? Or will it be just between the air node and the earth node operator? We will see. And jitter, as I talked about earlier, and packet loss. So sometimes it's not only delay the package in a non-average way, but sometimes the packets are lost too, and will have to be resend and upload and download speed tests. Oh, so bandwidth is also a part of this, and that of course makes sense, for example, for video services. But I hope the different services will use these quality metrics in different ways. I would suspect that for video calls it's much more important with higher bandwidth than for pure audio call. Then it will be more important with the latency and not any packet loss, so you can hear the voice clearly. That will be interesting to see. And they don't mention everything. They say and several other metrics that together with the mean opinion scores. And this opinion, I guess, will be formed out of this historical quality metrics and these health checks. And I believe it seems to be that the air nodes do this periodic health checks of the different nodes, but it will be interesting to see exactly how these health checks work. Because for example, maybe one network from a local operator has a lot of trouble reaching this other network, and their health check would then report as very bad. But this Earth node, for example, is great for this other network. Would it be per network? Would it be just overall score? These things will matter when it comes to making the best product as possible for the customer. So I believe this has to be looked very carefully at, and it has to be something that's evolved and developed together with the community as we implement all of these different earth nodes, as we implement all of these different air node designs, as we use all of these different networks and find out what's the best use cases and what's the best methods to implement. And I really like that all of these quality metrics will be publicly available, and they will use a sidechain to store all of this information. And how are you identified as, say, an earth node? They will have this form of hardware fingerprint. So I guess that means if you want to start over again, you did not do a great score, you want to reset your history, you would actually have to use new equipment to do that, because you have this hardware fingerprint. But there's a historic grade and there's a today's grade, so you can also, of course, keep improving. And this will matter for node operators. They want to set a good history from the start, and you want to be reliable, and you want to be there from the start to building a history as well. And the penalties are harsh. If you are under a defined threshold, you will not be included in a random selection of pools for the communication that's being handled until your grades improve. So it matters a lot. And this doesn't really detail how long, like let's say you have a short blackout, and let's say you're an Earth node operator who did not have a battery backup solution and your internet went down for 1 hour, would you then be penalized for 2 weeks, 1 week? How long would you be out of this system? So a lot of details, I think, needs to be worked out together with the community. But why would you bother to do all this as an operator? Why is because of course you will be incentivized. This is part of the sharing economy. There will be transaction fees, and you could either just set the transaction fee and just use your World Mobile tokens as a stake and be fine with that, or you can actually compete with the rest of the market. If you want others to delegate to you, you will probably have to compete on the transaction fees, the fees proposed, and then it will be, of course, a pressure to have the lowest cost, and that's in the interest of the network, as it means that the services will be as cheap as possible. And how do, for example, Earth node operators share? They share it proportionally. They are rewarded by producing blocks, so on the ledger, and committing them to the blockchain. And these blocks contain not only the financial settlement, but also metadata, for example, hash reference to the call detail record. So it's not stored. This is, what's the public information, but the record is there, and then you could go to this private ledger and find really the call details. And you're also rewarded for your participation in providing services to the users, such as routing or communication traffic. So if you do the telecommunication module, for example. And this is interesting. It's generic, and it means that probably in the future there will be more modules. You could offer different services. This means that Earth node operators probably will have to evolve and develop what's our specialty, what kind of services are you specializing in. For example, I suspect there will be some form of storage providing, and Earth node operators are in a great position to provide that, as they're already talking to the air nodes. And if the air node could have like a cloud storage through the Earth node, why not? And that could be an interesting module. So that's just an example, and what I'm thinking is that this is also something that will need to evolve together with the community. And this is why it also has to be in such white papers a generic implementation, and it could be others as well. And the selection for blockchain is very much the same as through the consensus staking algorithm Ouroboros in Cardano. And the reference to is actually like using side chains using the same assets. That's the reference here. So to me, this could suggest that we will have staking from the native token assets, World Mobile token that's on Cardano, that will be used for staking, even if it's on a private chain of World Mobile, or if it's really connected on the Cardano chain. And actually asked this question, and what they said, Antonio, Chief Technical Officer, he said like he don't have an answer yet to this. Both options are being explored, and they are working on this together with Input Output Global. So my question is really like, would it be staking on Cardano and using the Cardano as the way to register the stake, or would it be on the private network the staking will happen? And the answer is they don't have a sure answer of this yet. They're exploring both of these options. And for me, like a native token staking seems like a great idea, and would be cool if they implement. And this algorithm takes the node's total stake, historic availability, and reliability. That's interesting. This is very different from Cardano. Cardano doesn't have any health metrics. There's no other than did you produce the block or did you not produce the block. So if you're offline between blocks, there's no penalty for that. But in World Mobile, it seems that they will use this availability and reliability. Of course, it makes sense because the Earth node needs to be more available, especially if it's using services such as telecommunication. But that's a very big difference and important to know. And it will be then a weighted, used as a weight for this random selection. So it's still random selection, such as in Ouroboros, but here your availability and reliability will weight in on your stake. So it's a proof of stake plus, it's a proof of stake with more added to it. So that's actually a really important point. The telecommunication operations and the selection criteria will depend on the type of service being provided. So that's what I discussed earlier. Like, would you need different quality metrics for a video service compared to audio service? And yeah, hopefully they will make different selection criteria for the different services, as that makes a lot of sense. You need more bandwidth for video services than for audio services, for example. Communication as a service, CAS, voice and SMS. Yeah, that's one of the initial things they will look at. And network as a service, internet access service. And of course, when it comes to network as a service, you would want the best latency, the best local bandwidth, and the fewest hops, I guess. So it's different, and it's good to measure it different. And as they say, they also differentiate between on net, and here net means the World Mobile Net. And if there's no Ether node involved, it's a on net call. And if it's an off net call, meaning you have to talk to some legacy structure, you have to use this Ether node. And they will use an intelligent routing algorithm. I hope this will be publicly available. And it will ensure a minimum routing time and a minimum quality threshold in the signal. So a minimum standard, I guess they mean with this, not a minimum quality. They mean this is the bar of the standard. We don't go below this. It should have this quality threshold. And it will be very similar to the routing algorithms used in regular voice over IP. So, for example, you don't want too much packet loss, you don't want too much jitter. Yeah. And when they do this for each hop, they will not limit to the single best provider. So they will have these metrics. They will know, like, this air node, the best Earth node to contact is this one. It has a latency of 10, no jitter, no packet loss. But what they will do is they will make a pool. Let's say, we don't know the details yet, but let's say there's 10 Earth nodes provider that all have a great connection to this air node. And it will be randomly selected among those. And then the next part of the route, there will be again be a pool, and one of those will be selected. This will ensure some form of randomization. It will ensure, I guess, that it will use more of the network resources available. And that's actually an important point, because you don't want everything to be run through the best node. If you do that, that node alone will handle everything. And you want to spread out this distributed this utilization. It's good for the safety of the network, it's good for the utilization of the network. As long as you meet these minimum thresholds of standards, the user will still have a good quality experience. So yeah, it makes a lot of sense to do this type of pool with a randomization. And this will really be important to how much we we see that the network's being utilized by the whole network and not just some operators. And as you can see, this process will be repeated for each of the hops. So every hop, and it will be interesting to see how many hops there will be. Will there be multiple earth nodes communicating with each other, or just like a starting point and the end point, or will there be many earth nodes in between, for example? And it's clear that there will be a public settlement layer. It will be on Cardano, and there will be a world mobile world mobile chain layer, and it will be effectively working as a side chain of Cardano. So probably it will, because they reference to a research paper on sidechains using having access to the same assets. So maybe it will be a sidechain that has access to the world mobile native token on the Cardano layer. It will be interesting to see. And the earth nodes themselves, they will have rewards for providing access, and as I talked about earlier, reporting back of the quality of adjacent nodes. Okay, so it means that this quality of service measurements of the internode API, it will be there for the air nodes, it will be there for the earth nodes. The air nodes seems to be measuring the quality of adjacent nodes, and probably the earth nodes will be measuring each other. The air nodes will be measuring each other, and such and such. And the rewards earned are based on the volume of users and traffic that are processed by the node. So it's incentivizing more uses. And that means that a village with more uses and maybe more people will have a higher profit from their air node than a smaller village. So it will not be based on just like an hourly fee or something like that. It will be based on volume. And yeah, I believe that's all I have for now. I hope I made some interesting points when it comes to the earth node and its interaction with the air node. I can leave maybe with a summary of this. So as I said, this internode API is what will communicate with everything. And in this example, I used the earth node, but every node will have this internode API. And it's responsible for the communication between all the nodes and all the subsystems through the network. So if you have this earth node, you could have this telecommunication module and installed, and then you can have these extra services, and it goes through the internode API. And the same if you are doing the authentication layer, and this I think is obligatory. You can opt out of the telecommunication layer. Hopefully we'll have enough earth nodes doing this, but I believe this decentralized identity solution will be mandatory, because every user who uses this needs to register if they're not a guest account, and if they want to use the service for longer than what a guest account allows you to, and then you will need this authentication layer. So that's another point. This will be something we have to handle as earth node operators, and it will be through this Atala Prism digital ID solution. Of course, every earth node will have this blockchain module, and there will be a public part of this ledger, it should say here, and there will be a private part of this ledger as well. So yeah, that's a summary of it. I hope this was useful. And keep in mind, other Nord Pool and NBX, we are still running this promo where we are giving out World Mobile tokens to all of the delegators. If you delegate 100 ADA or more, and you will get, after one epoch with delegation, you will get one World Mobile token just for delegating, even if you just have 100 ADA, and that's the minimum. And starting like from the moment you delegate, you also get like 0.00002 World Mobile tokens for every ADA delegated. So for example, if you have 100,000 ADA, you will get 2 more World Mobile tokens per epoch. And this starts immediately, so you don't have to wait one epoch for this reward. the reward for every wallet, no matter the ADA size, has to have a 1 epoch delay, as you don't want people to abuse that you can even have a very small delegation and still get this great reward. And on ADA Nord Pool you can find like a calculation how this works, like how to collect this through the vending machine that the ADA seal pool made, and also like some examples of how this is actually quite profitable to do. And also it support World Mobile. We are big fans of World Mobile. I'm deeply integrated in this ecosystem. I'm going to follow it closely. I believe we should work on this because it's going to matter for a lot of people, and it's great work, and I love working with great work that has meaning for many. So very meaningful for me to work on World Mobile, and I'm very glad to have NBX on board on that. We are going to be doing a node. I'm also doing a private node as well, and yeah, I can't wait to get started. So hope this video was useful. As always, give me feedback, and you can join on the Telegram channel, or you can go to the ADA Nord Pool site and see all the ways you can communicate with me. All right, bye.